Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org.
Hello, this is Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Lisa Medhus, her son Eric Medhus, and Jamie Butler. Lisa Medhus, physician and mother of 5, has practiced internal medicine in Houston, Texas for over 30 years. After the death of her 20-year-old son, Dr. Medhus struggled to find answers to life's most important questions. Eventually, though, the answers, and along with hundreds of others about death, the afterlife, and more, came from her deceased son through spirit communicator Jamie Butler. Jamie Butler is a gifted medium, teacher, and author from Atlanta, Georgia. Jamie has retained her ability to see and hear spirits since she was a child. Over the past 20 years, Jamie has built a trusted reputation as a medium and teacher, and has clients who consulted from her from all over the world. Eric Medhus is an eternal 20-year-old man who passed away on October 6, 2009. From his new place in the afterlife, Eric helps those who struggle with their human experience. He's the inspiration for and contributed to the Channeling Eric blog and community, and author of My Life After Death, a memoir from heaven.
Hi, Lisa, Jamie, Eric. Welcome to Author Magazine.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having us. Eric says, what's up?
So the book is My Life After Death, a memoir from heaven. I got to tell you, I loved the book. I've read a fair amount of books on this subject, but never like this one. Can you tell us about the concept of the book?
The concept is quite different from my first book, My Son and the Afterlife, because that was about my journey from being a physician raised by atheists who is quite skeptical about whether consciousness survives death, to my long, bumpy road to becoming a believer. And in that, Eric does describe bits about the afterlife and such, but this one is his memoir. It's about his journey from just before his death until the present time.
Right, and it's told from first-person perspective, as if he's standing behind a typewriter or behind a microphone and telling his story. You know, you can read a book about near-death experiences, and someone will cross over, but inevitably there'll be some figure saying you've got to go back, and we don't get a peek behind the curtain. Where in this book you do. Whose idea was the book?
Actually, it was the publisher's idea. I was so exhausted after writing the first book because, it's an emotional job for me. It really is, to have to revisit Eric's death and such. So I thought I was finished with writing books, to tell you the truth. But we asked Eric, and Eric was game.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the first book, I really sensed your anguish, especially when you had to go over his crossing over.
Right.
And of course this is written from his perspective, so we don't get the same perspective. But how did you write the book? I mean, is it like Eric had a manuscript on the other side and he was reading it to you, or are you asking questions? How did you get the narrative to be what it is?
It was a mix, really, of just free-flowing Eric. Sometimes I'd have to prod him with certain questions. The publisher would read what I transcribed from him and to suggest some new for clarification and so on.
So you were kind of the editor. You were processing all this material. Is that safe to say?
Right. Sometimes we had to change things, like if he flip-flopped between senses or went from second person to third person. But the material is all Eric. I remember standing out in front of the garage, and I asked Eric when he was alive, what are you here to do? And I don't know why I asked such a spiritual question, because I wasn't particularly spiritual, but he said, I'm here to teach people to live in the moment. And it floored me.
So one of the things when I was reading the book, I got this, I had the question, so how was this written? Was it dictated? And I got this image of Eric, writing a manuscript on the other side. And I was just wondering, and maybe want to know, do people write books on the other side? I mean, like my favorite authors who didn't get to write that last sequel and they crossed over, can I expect I'm going to be able to read more, or is that unrealistic?
Eric jumps in, he goes, oh my God, Brian, yes, you'll be able to read what is written over here. He goes, but it's not really like an written format per se. It's not really like a grab that book off the shelf and sit down and read it thing. He says the way that we perceive information, storytelling alike, is more of an experience. So you'll definitely want to go through all the other books that you've read too, because you're going to experience it in a way that's much more grander, much more entertaining than just the words on the page.
And wow, interesting. That's cool. So when I read descriptions about what the afterlife is like, and one of the things I've read, and Eric definitely corroborates this in a more detailed way than I've ever read before, that the afterlife, we don't have physical bodies, and we're basically, for lack of a better term, blobs of light, right? And that personally doesn't sound very appealing to me, you know. And in the book, Eric describes what it's like, and he talks about its advantages and its shortcomings. And one of the things he mentions, for example, is being able to eat a slice of pizza and having, when he had a body and he had that physical experience. So he was tasting it, he had the texture of the pizza in his mouth, and he seems to be able to have some sort of experience akin to that where he is, yet it's almost like he's merging with pizza energy, and it's not the same. And so it seems to me, in order to have a completely physical lifetime, one has to be reborn and have a body, right? So here's my question: if say Eric wanted to have another physical lifetime, is he stuck with being reborn on Earth, with an Earth lifetime with all its angst and potential negativity, or are there other worlds, for instance, where they're basically Earth-like, with trees and basically human beings, where people live more in harmony, and he could have experience physical love and eat pizza without dealing with disease and misunderstanding and conflict?
He says, first of all, when you say coming to incarnate on Earth with angst or potential negativity, let's say it with a warmth and an excitement, because this is some of the qualities that we actually fish for when we show up here. This is what makes it so rich to have that human life. And no, I don't have to pick just this one. There are other selections out there that have similar dimensional planes where they're dense like this, but we kind of see it in a way of categories. So we have Earth. Earth deals a lot with the right and wrong, pros and cons, choice, duality. We have other life forms that strictly are just based in love or in war or in creativity, invention style. And even in those organizations or those categories, they have levels of density. Like Earth is very dense. And he goes, I mean that in a very sweet way, not like in a dumb way. It's just incredibly 3D. And he laughs. Some other ones aren't like that.
There's one description in the book that I love where he describes, he's a metaphor of a blender spinning really fast, and that's kind of like he has to slow himself down to be able to kind of interact with things on Earth and that sort of thing. And I wonder though, when he's interacting with people on his own level and in his own plane of existence, is there still no sense of touch?
Right, there's no stop mechanism. Like, let's say you kicked the bucket, Brian, you came over, and I was like, dude, it's so good to see you. And I reach out to shake your hand or give you bro hug. He's like, it's not, we don't resist each other. We move into each other.
Oh, wow.
And when you agree to move into each other, it's this merging kind of a thing. And that stop touch, that aggressive like bump, is then transformed into the merge of emotions, the merge of honesty, of truth, of knowledge. He says it's really powerful. It's just extremely different.
Right. Yeah, that came through in the story, was that it seemed like there were no like casual conversations where he is. It's like everything is pretty intense, right? So he mentions having the ability to manifest things by thought, and one of the things it seems like he likes to do is to manifest a motorcycle and go riding. And I'd like to understand more about what that experience is like of riding a motorcycle in the afterlife, because it sounds like such a physical thing. So does he also have to manifest a body to be able to ride the motorcycle? And if that's true, how different is his experience from, say, riding a motorcycle in a physical body on Earth?
He says, dude, Brian, you're hired. Book number 2, Questions Offered by Brian Mercer.
All right, I'm
Getting
ready.
deep into the deep. That's the subtitle right there. And he said, yeah, because I get to have the experience the way that I really wanted to create it on Earth, but didn't have the opportunity to. And I do have to create that body, that motorcycle, and it's all thought form.
So in a temporary way, you can have those physical-like experiences. They might not be
Yeah.
exactly the way they are here, but it in a temporary kind of way, you can.
Yes.
And so he also mentions, and I don't say you or he also mentions playing the guitar, and again also a very physical experience. Is it the same type of thing?
You can. He goes, so when we're talking about physical replication, where I am, we can do it where it is, we could say, true to life mimic. You know, we make the body, we make the track, we make the motorcycle, we make the guitar, the strings, and everything. Or we can create the sensation of the experience where we don't really need to manifest all those physical attributes. So in making the music, I could either do the guitar and play it with fingers and strings and have sound, or it's simply just the creation of the music with my energy. It could sound like a guitar. I could have it sound like a piano. I could do harmony.
Wow. But you you enjoys playing the guitar.
He said, "You can call me you."
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know who I'm addressing. So
he said, "Yeah, I like the physical sensations because that's what brought me a lot of peace being on Earth as Eric, was that kind of physical, tangible experience. You know, the hugs, the touching, and this is one of the things that I said, what did I really miss? Like my mom was sharing earlier, I missed that kind of experience, so I create it that way because that's just a personal thing."
Exactly, but yet he can. It seems like there were times during the book, and that continue even now, where he's interacting with you, Elisa, in the physical. Like he's there all the time, according to his story.
Well, most of the time, I can't get him out of my hair. I love having him here, and he does usually come, according to him and according to some of the things I've noticed, he does come to me when I'm waking up and sort of hangs out with me until I get well onto my work project, and then he usually comes back when everybody starts coming home from school or work, etc.
And you don't find it's weird to have him there all the time. You know what I'm saying? That there's no privacy. I guess that's a weird question because there's like.
I don't care.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right.
That doesn't bother me a bit. The more he's around, the happier I am.
Oh, that's outstanding.
He said, "She's crazy, Brian. She's crazy."
I know. But I told you that.
So Jamie's going to know why I'm asking this next question. So there's a chapter in the book, Eric, where you talk about animals in the afterlife, including types of animals that don't currently exist here on Earth. And you also mentioned that when you were making the transition, you know, you stayed a couple of days to, you know, you to say goodbye to people and you attend your funeral. And then you started to cross over, and as you were crossing over, I think your aunt was taking you on the other side, and you said that you were joined by various dogs that you had during life. But you really don't elaborate any more about pets. So I was curious, can you talk about pets and their relationships with their former human companions after they make the transition?
He said, yeah, I think the first kind of blunt thing that needs to be talked about is we need to stop seeing pets as being so extremely different than who we are. They have a soul, you have a soul. There's a lot of fucking common ground here. So when we think of it this way, then all of a sudden, of course, they would be there for you. Of course they want to see you again. Of course they love you, want to lick you or bite you or whatever the sweet nuzzle thing was. When they sign up to be in your life, or let's just say when, you know, they cross paths with you, or when you take them in, whatever the circumstance, and you have that relationship, be it a wildlife or with a domesticated animal, there's a bond that's built. And just like anything else, when life carries on, when you lose your body, you cross over, that bond is still available. And it could be available even to the big old white oak hanging out in your backyard that you love sitting under, that you talked about, that you cared for. There's a bond right there with a living energy. And so when you cross over, most likely, if you weren't an asshole. I was hesitating to say that one, sorry. Because they're going to come back and want to know how you're doing and build upon that relationship. There's no lesser than or greater than here. We're all equal. And if you enjoy that community and you want to bring those bonds back, they are all going to be there ready to greet you, to talk to you. Even those that have incarnated back on Earth. There's that kind of concept that, well, if they died when I was 13 and I died when I'm 80, my pet has probably already incarnated somewhere else, so I'm not going to see them. There's no disappearing act here when it comes to energy. There's no disappearing act. It's all available.
So, Eric, what type of relationship do you have with your former pets? I mean, were you close to them in life? And, is it the same? Is it similar now?
Yes, it is. Yes. Because I think my mom agrees. We've always had pets. And they were a way to help me ground myself. Because for lack of a better word, it's like with bipolar, sometimes you can't really just hop on one steady train and ride that emotion. But it's like the consistency that a pet companion provides. It's so grounding. And even though I tease them and, which probably wasn't right, but I did anyways, we had an intense relationship and they helped me meet my needs.
Right. So now do you actually, see them, interact with them on a regular basis? And is it the same type of relationship, or is it slightly different because there's more of a sense of equality?
Yeah, there's a slight of a difference. Like, Peanut's not so little anymore.
Oh, Peanut, our little chihuahua.
That's sweet.
Oh, that's cool. Like, not so little anymore. And he said, so you look at Peanut a little bit different, And then there's also the quality of equal communication. It's no longer that feeling of, I'm talking to you, why aren't you talking back? Or, I think he understands because he's looking at me like that. It's, that they pick up something, but in the afterlife, they really get to throw down with you.
So was there any conversation that you had in particular that surprised you in terms of information you received?
He goes, there's not a lot that surprises me. He says, I'm pretty intense, but off the top of my head, confrontation on that I was mean, when I never would have looked at myself as being a mean person, or that I really did scare the shit out of them and that they didn't like that, but I thought it was funny as hell. That was hard to hear because I never wanted to hurt any of our pets or scare them that bad.
What's interesting, and this pet thing is an interesting example. I don't know, Lisa, if you plan on writing any more books along these lines, but it seemed like there were just a little bit a topic that was like that there was maybe a 2 or 3 page chapter on, and it's like I wanted more. It's like, what, that's it, and then you go on something else, and of course that was beneficial because we got to sample a lot of different topics. So here's an example of one topic that I thought, are you kidding? That's it? That's all we get? So Eric talks about having a relationship with his soulmate, a spirit named Jillian. And I wonder, first of all, if you guys could talk about the concept of the soulmate. What does that really mean?
With soulmate, he said, let's first get the concept of a soul family. Your soul is a collection of all your incarnations, of all your knowledge, of all your characters, of all your experiences. And in that process, we tend to hang out with other ones that we like. But my soul group, even my mom is in it, my soul group is different than hers because she has her own soul group. Do you understand? Like, it's not like we've got 30 and there's only 30 people in that soul group and that is it. If you're in mine, I'm in yours, and we all have the same people. It doesn't really work that way. It's all individually designed and created. So in my soul family, I have a few that I run with or incarnate with several more times than the rest of them. It's because we play out our lessons, our contracts, our experiences with great ease. And we have the strength to play the hard ones with each other. So when we do that, we end up becoming what you could call soulmate. It is a deeper understanding of the other person, and definitely, I would say, willing to do the hard work with each other.
So in other words, it's someone who you've incarnated with many times and who you kind of resonate with on the other side. Is that safe to say?
That is safe to say, Brian.
So tell us more about Jillian and what it was like to be reintroduced to her again and what that relationship is like now.
There's not many times I can find Eric a little more quiet or recluse, but the consistent topic seems to be about his personal love life.
Well, his mama is overhearing, so that's probably part of it. It's okay, Eric. You and I used to talk about this kind of stuff all the time.
He said to be reconnected with her was, I think the first emotion that I had was sadness. And oddly enough, it was almost like a deep grief of recognizing how much time we'd had apart and just seeing why we would even make those choices to begin with, what we were going to learn from being apart. So coming back together, it's not that kind of thing that you see in the movies where you're like running across the fields and being like, yeah, you're there. So, but as soon as you recognize really what your roles are, it was just an instant connection. You don't sit around and be like, hey, you want to hang out with me? And he said it's incredible. It's a sense of safety and a powerful vulnerability. And he goes, I don't think you really get to taste that to the full degree on Earth.
So Eric, when you experienced her again after you crossed over, was it like seeing, for lack of a better term, a blob of light, or did she have some sense of a body?
Yeah, he said she looked like herself. And I said, what does that look like? He said, I love it. He's not even making eye contact with me. He's looking down at the ground.
Oh, Eric.
He said she was beautiful. She was a woman. He can show me her eyes, her nose. She has a petite figure, and she's tall and lean like Eric. So he recognizes her physically right away. But he said that his head couldn't catch up with him. He didn't know why he knew her. But as soon as he started recognizing why he knew her, he felt so sad that he'd been away before he caught up to the enjoyment of having her with him.
It makes me think when you talk about soul groups, I wonder, like Elisa, you're in Eric's soul group and vice versa. I wonder if there are people that we interact with in life that are in our soul group and that, say, on the other side we know quite well, and in this lifetime we just beat tangentially, or is it that we really we all if they're in our soul group, they're going to be in our lives physically? Is it the same?
No, they don't have to be in your lives physically. We design it in such different ways. Like Jillian and I weren't living at the same time in this time frame. Like, we're just assuming time is linear right now. And like you were saying, Brian, like they could be intently just so focused on your health and well-being, yet it's the person at the grocery store that bags your groceries. And you guys never share numbers, but you constantly exchange smiles, and it means something to you to see them every day and to ask them briefly about their life for those 5 minutes.
So why would you choose a lifetime, say, where Jillian was in your physical perimeter, but not interacting on a meaningful basis?
He said, well, for this life, my lesson was more about internal struggle, and it was about family life. It wasn't so much about having an intimate relationship. So we didn't see it as important to have her around. Oh, so he means having her around physically on Earth, born and incarnated. But right. In spirit, she was around.
Elisa, I really get a sense from reading this book that it almost seems like you're closer to Eric now than you were when he is alive. And kind of get a sense of like, it's like a son that you talk to on the phone frequently, but he's in another country and you just can't see him. Is that what it's like for you?
That's it. And, I'll have to say that transcribing his book has really almost all but healed me completely. Because now I know exactly how he's doing, and he's doing so great. I know what his life is like over there. I know what it looks like where he is. It's just the mystery's all but gone, and that's so comforting to me. So you're right. It's almost like he's on some study abroad program. And eventually he's going to come home with dirty laundry. It's that sort of sensation. I miss him. I miss the hugs. I miss fussing at him to come downstairs and do his chores. I miss telling him, please be careful when you go out with your friends. But there's no more of that deep, deep grief that I had before that left me so broken.
Right, because I get a sense that you have the sense that he's in your life, all the time. So he's still in the house. It's just he's not physically there for you to give him a hug, right?
Right, and I think that's one of the big lessons I took away from this book is that just because you lose someone does not mean that you have to stop the relationship. I mean, people have this concept of death being the end. That's it, door closed, book shut. But that's really not true. I mean, your loved one is still the same. They just don't happen to have a body, and they're in this parallel dimension that's on top of our own. And they don't want you to forget about them. They want to continue to have a relationship, and there's no reason why you can't. That was a big lesson for me, and that was a huge comfort to me as well.
Well, that's really interesting because I had the sense that Eric is close to you and your family because there's this sense that he left so young and he still wants to continue those relationships. But what you're saying is it's pretty typical for people who have passed on to still want to have that relationship.
Exactly. I'm not sure if every spirit does. I guess, Eric, you could answer that.
He said, honestly, when you get here and you start to adapt to the afterlife, for lack of a better word, home, really, that you start to learn everything about the life that you just experienced. So even if there was some deep hardship or you caused a great amount of grief for somebody else because of an action you did, it starts to unfold on why you were motivated to do that and why you chose to live your life in a certain way. And once you get past this and get into that knowledge, trust me, you're sitting around going, oh man, I miss them. Like, I want to help. I want to be there. I want to support. Like, this feeling of community and all together is just, it's so contagious. It's incredible.
So it's not like they have better things to do. It's okay. All right.
He likes that too.
Because that's what I would think. I think, well, yeah, I've been there, done that. I moved on. But you're saying that they're still. But okay, and then I guess it would depend on the type of person you were. If you were attached to life and loved ones, you'll be more likely to still want those relationships.
Absolutely. And he goes, and there's those times you run into it where the person on earth is like, fuck no, you died, you did this, you're out of my life, I'm free finally. And that's kind of hard to handle on this side because you're processing your shit and you got it laid out just fine. But the person on earth is like, hell no. They're not going to have anything of it. And so you've got to kind of sit and wait.
Wow.
You help on the perimeter, but you can't engage because that's forcing yourself into a space where you're not invited. And you don't do that.
Right. Eric talks in the book about being shown his past lives, but at the same time he also mentions that time where he isn't sequential. And so that made me wonder, was he shown what we would consider here in 2015 to be his future lifetimes?
Yes.
So basically he's done it all now, in a sense, right?
Yeah, he goes, that's good. That's really going to fuck with the listeners. Way to go, Brian. But yes, you are right.
Well, that's kind of messing with me at the moment. So, but yet, if you have these different personas, let's say, I want to say that, do you mention that you were a woman in one lifetime, like in the 1400s or 1600s, something like that? So,
he's nodding his head, yes.
So how when you're there, you're definitely, when I read that book, I definitely get a sense of Ericness, for lack of a better term, but yet you're really all these parts. When you cross over, you're still Eric, but at the same time you have all these different personas. What makes you not, Scantron, the guy who is incarnated in 2350, or this woman from the 1400s?
Yeah, just pick a life that maybe I thought was a little bit sweeter than mine, and just like merge into it and dissolve my Ericness and take on the other.
Well, yeah, exactly. So is it because I get the sense that like you would become what amounts to your higher self, as opposed to necessarily being any one of your incarnations.
He said, that's cool. So we're just going to talk like time is linear, period. Right?
Okay.
So you're conversing with me now. I'm not in human form, am I? he's flipping his hands back and forth and looking at him. Am I? No, Eric, you're not. He goes, okay, so here I am connected to my higher consciousness right now. I'm connected to all the lives I've agreed to live, future and past. And the one I'm presenting to you right now, because you are connected to knowing me as Eric Medhus. Now, this is the one that I'm living through. But let's say we're in 1400s, and you're communicating with me to the beyond. I'm going to present myself, as Elizabeth, because that's who I was. And through my higher consciousness, I will know of Eric Medhus, but I won't react or behave like him because I'm communicating to that thread that's connected to that particular moment.
I like your analogy, the wagon wheel analogy that you use, Eric. He says that the higher consciousness represents the hub of a wagon wheel, and all the spokes are your incarnations, past, present, and future. And when the wheel rolls in the mud, it'll leave a linear track. That's the timeline that we create as a human construct. But he'll also describe all these lives as a stack of books, a vertical stack of books. And each book is a life. We just happen to be reading the book that is our present life. But all the future and past ones are still in that stack.
All happening at the same time. And he goes, everybody, listeners included, please excuse my mother. She's a little dated. Wagon wheel. I would have said bicycle wheel, but that's all right.
Okay.
So does it mean that time travel as we know it is possible? I mean, so
yes.
So he could, if he wants to, he could go to when there were dinosaurs or when the ancient pyramids were being built and just hang out there.
Yes. Now ask me if I have time to do it, Brian. And now he's laughing.
Well, I know, but if you don't have time to do it, but if there's no time.
Thank you. He goes, that's where the joke lies.
I see. Gotcha. I see. One last question about before we move away from the time travel thing is has Eric gone into to a future Earth, and what is that experience like for him?
And we're pretending time is linear.
Yeah, again.
Future Earth.
Future from our perspective.
Yeah. He said, first off, great technology. Can I give spoiler alert? He says, well, the masses do get to acknowledge that there are other multidimensional beings that exist. No longer is that kept under wraps. There is not world mass domination or war. Because that's kind of relief, but war never goes away on Earth. Because I will say that. Spoiler alert. He says the one thing that I love so much about it is the technology and the ability to, he says, fly. He's talking about going into space. So many other frontiers are kind of open. But then he says at the same time, I don't enjoy how he's kind of hitting his head. He's looking for the right word. The status, like the poor people don't get to have those experiences. He really wants more sense of an equality. And he says he's going to be working with nonviolent communication with compassionate communication to governments and everything like that to help lessen that spread. Did I share too much?
So when you say multidimensional beings, what you mean, like spirits? Is that what you're...
Oh, Brian. I mean aliens.
Okay, that's what I was. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but so aliens. So I mean, but we're experiencing that now. It's just that it's not generally known, correct?
Right. It's more under wraps. Only pockets of people get to find out the truth, and not the masses. But in the future, the masses will get to know the truth, and we're okay. We're okay.
And what is it? Is that going to happen in my lifetime? Because that would be cool.
He leans over. He goes, how old do you want to live? He's laughing. He goes, yes, that'll happen in your lifetime.
97. That's what I'm shooting for. Jamie, I have a question for you, and this is, I guess, along the same lines. It seems like, when you're a spirit translator, the spirits tend to know what's going to happen in our personal future. So, for example, they might know if a child was born before, even the parents do. How much do spirits generally impart when you're having these translations?
I find they impart most of the information that they can, where our free will really isn't going to flip the situation. So if the way I've been explained and the way I've seen it play out in other sessions, beyond Eric as well, is they look at our probable outcome. They look at the past and what we are attracted to and how we made our decisions, and then they can give us a glimpse of what our decisions might create in the future. Now, there's some things that are a little more rock solid, if the baby's coming or if the baby's going to have a learning difficulty because that's going to add to having a lesson. Then they'll mention those things as long as it's not interfering in a lesson that we need to experience kind of as a mystery viewpoint or from an unknowing viewpoint.
Wow. So
does that make sense?
It does make sense, but it sounds like that it's not necessarily that time is or what's the future is set. It sounds like the future is what we make it. To use a Terminator 2 line, to steal a line from them, right? It's not necessarily.
I would never have known.
It's kind of like quantum probabilities, right? Every choice will create this new reality for us.
Right. So
yes.
Okay. So we do manifest things on Earth in a similar way to how he does it. It just takes longer, it seems.
Yes.
Because of the whole time thing. Well, Lisa, it occurs to me that the process of writing this book, I imagine you've learned quite a bit, not just about what Eric's life and the afterlife, but about yourself as well. What did you learn going through this experience of having to mold the story in a way that made sense for us as readers?
Well, I think I've learned just as much as every reader is going to learn, and my awareness has expanded so much. I know now why I have this human experience, why I've had to have the hardships and the tragedies that I've endured. I discovered that I have a lot of strength because transcribing that chapter on his death was really, really hard for me because he shared a lot of detail that I really didn't want to know. But I've grown as a person.
Right. I mean, I gotta tell you, I tell your story to a lot of people because it's so transformational. Because here you were, someone who you would characterize yourself as an atheist at some point in time. Yes. Well,
an agnostic. I really didn't think about it. My parents were atheists.
Okay. And if you have someone who is an agnostic and you're talking to that person, what would you say to that person, having been there and now have gone through the path that you've gone through? What do you tell them if you wanted to give them comfort or help them expand their consciousness?
Well, I would encourage them to be open-minded skeptics, not closed-minded ones. I would tell them that there's science out there that is bridging the gap of spirituality. And I'd also remind them to consider a quote by the great author Schopenhauer. Truth goes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed, and we see that a lot with spirituality. Then it's scorned, and then eventually it's accepted as self-evident. Again, I think spirituality is going through those phases, and science is hurrying us along. This is the same thing that happened when we were evolving from thinking the Earth was flat to the Earth is round. And I would also tell them that just because you can't see spirits does not mean there's not life after death. I mean, we can't see radio waves, but we know they exist. So just because we can't perceive something with our senses does not mean it doesn't exist. There is hope. There is life after death.
Well, thanks very much, both of you, all three of you, I guess, for being here and answering my questions. And I wish I could talk more and find out more about the aliens and whatnot, but we have to bring our time to a close.
This has been Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. Today I spoke with Dr. Lisa Medhus, her son Eric, and Jamie Butler.